today often feel sad because of the way they look. And this is because of a societal construct that has said some people should look a certain way. Welcome to another exciting episode on Catholic Faith Forum. I am Nonso, and today with me is Chima as usual, but we're not here alone. And we have a guest, Mrs. Nigdima Ofili Egungu. You're welcome, ma.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Well, you know my name. I'm a writer, an editor, and a proofreader, and I work from home. I'm a freelancer. Okay. I'm married. I'm a mom of one.
Wow.
I have a little boy of 2.
Beautiful.
Am I supposed to talk about my hobbies? But yeah, I'm Catholic, and
okay.
I'm also involved in the work, Opus Dei. I think that's pretty much.
Yeah, thank you so much. How are you, Chima?
I'm fine. I'm doing good. I'm here and very psyched about this topic because there are some things that have been happening of late, but we'll talk about them off camera.
All right. We'll be right back to talk more on body shaming after this short break.
Catholic Faith Forum on TV.
Welcome back. This is still Catholic Faith Forum, and we're talking about body shaming. Ms. Tima, I want to ask you what body shaming is to you.
Body shaming is the mockery of people or persons on the basis of their physical attributes, whatever they may be, whether it's complexion, height, weight, facial features, whatever.
Do you think it affects the confidence of a person?
Naturally. I mean, people say, what's this funny quote people say about not letting criticism get to you? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but
yeah,
that doesn't make any sense. We're human beings and words do affect us. I mean, science has shown that people who grow up in affirming environments grow up to be more confident.
Okay.
So naturally, if you're teasing people or mocking people more accurately on the basis of things they have no control over, it's going to affect their body image and ultimately their confidence. I mean, everyone knows how teenagers get. In your teens, you care how you look, you care how people think about you. And then imagine at that phase, or even long before then, people are telling you, you have a big nose, you have a big head, you're fat, you're short. Things like that repeatedly, naturally will wear down anyone's confidence.
So, are there some certain features of our bodies that we can be in control of? For example, science has let us understand that there are endomorphs, mesomorphs, ectomorphs, all those body sizes, body types. So all these things, is it that we don't have any control over them, or are there ways to put them in check and all?
Ultimately, like you said, there are the mesomorphs, endomorphs, and all whatnot. God, in His infinite wisdom, decided to create people in different shapes, different genetic makeups, and all whatnot. So ultimately, your natural shape, there's pretty much nothing you can do about it. It comes mainly from genetics. I mean, you're a lady. You've seen if you've seen anything about fashion, you see people talking about apple shape, pear shape, things like that. You have absolutely no control over.
But what about people that think exercise can get you in a particular shape?
That's the thing. Exercise can only work with what is there. Exercise is not going to turn a pear-shaped woman to an hourglass. Wow. It's not going to happen. What it's going to do is make the best of what you've been given. And it's as with every other thing, so it is with your body. Whatever God has given you, you're supposed to make the best of it. It's the same. The debate also goes to makeup, for example. Some people think you shouldn't wear makeup. Some people think you should. But ultimately, it depends on how you're wearing the makeup. If you're wearing makeup to try to look totally different from what God made you to look like, that would be a bit absurd. But if you're wearing makeup to highlight, your best features, you're ultimately making the best of what God has given you. That's what we're supposed to do with everything. And it comes to your body too. If God has made you a medium-sized person, naturally between genes and maybe whatever health factors may exist. And then because you cannot control your eating, you're overweight. For
Wait, do you
example,
think people cannot control their eating?
well, when we say you cannot control your eating, obviously we're referring to self-control. I mean,
Okay.
we're not talking about health challenges. Self-control is different for everybody. And if we're Christians, we're Catholics, we must be honest enough to admit that everyone has an area where they struggle with self-control.
Yes. Yes.
So that the issue of self-control with people who are overweight, for example, is obvious because we can see the effects, but you cannot see the effects of people who are struggling with self-control and with secret sins, for example.
Okay.
So ultimately, yeah, that's what I mean by cannot control their eating. But of course, we recognize now that there are people who have health conditions where for one reason or the other, they need to keep eating and eating unless they go and check, for example, a thyroid function issue.
Yeah.
The person will either eat too much or eat too little. So in cases like that, they literally cannot control their appetite until they get help. But otherwise, when we say cannot control, we're talking about self-control. I mean, and if you cannot practice, temperance or self-control and you're overweight, you're obviously not making the best of what God has given you.
So stemming from your comments about eating and eating disorders, people eat too little, get fat. Some people don't eat. Some people eat much and then it doesn't even show in their bodies. And then some comments from other people make them feel sad about their bodies. And then they go to extremes to augment their bodies and all. What is the effect of body shaming on such people? Is it really what makes them go to these extremes?
Well, first and foremost, body shaming does have an effect. But you are saying people who go to the extreme, and if it's body shaming that pushes them over the edge. Sometimes it could be body shaming that pushes them over the edge. But unless they tell you their story, you'll never really know what the catalyst is. Because there are also psychological, even psychiatric disorders, with how you perceive the body. There's something called body dysmorphism.
Oh, really?
So or dysphoria, that you do not quite see yourself as you really are. That's true for most of us anyway, but in these people it's exaggerated. It's why you have somebody who is already really skinny saying, I need to lose weight, and everybody is like, lose weight to where?
To where?
Like you want to disappear, and so there are things like that. They could stem from body shaming, because ultimately body shaming is not always an active thing. Sometimes it's passive. We need to remember that it's a cultural thing. For example, we do not talk much about it, but if you listen to racial discourse, for example, in America, you hear a lot about colorism.
Yes.
So these are things that exist in our normative behavior. So we don't even think about it. We just take them for granted. The way we automatically assume that somebody who is fair is automatically attractive. Is automatically fine. And if somebody is dark, the person is not fine. And then if the person is really attractive, you say, oh, you're pretty for a dark person. Those are statements that come from a culture.
Okay.
So nobody may have actively said anything to such people, for example, but they live in a culture. They do not live apart from it. So they know what the standards of beauty are supposed to be. And when they look in the mirror, and whether in reality or in their imagination, it doesn't fit the image, depending on how grounded they are psychologically or how much help they need to get, then they're pushed to extremes. But body shaming does have a lot to do with it, because like I said, it's within the context of the culture. You feel like if you do not meet the standards of beauty, you're going to be mocked, you're going to be shamed, even when nobody is doing it.
True.
So that's the thing about body shaming. It's so insidious. It's not just, it doesn't have to even actively be done to have an effect.
Wow. So
Yeah, and you spoke, that's like consciously, people always think about themselves, their body.
Yes.
I want to ask, body shaming, does it give us, like if you see a fat man or a thin girl, just imagine, oh, she's like this and she's like, do you think it hides the true identity of people?
Yes, it does. Because especially if you're talking from a Christian and or Catholic perspective. If you're talking from the humanist secular angle, they may not agree with you because that there's a trend in the world today to almost animalize human beings. They now talk about us and our body functions and our bodies in terms of animalistic tendencies. Oh, we just feel like it, so you just do it, you know. But as Christians, as Catholics, we're aware that our real identity is not the body. The body is a vehicle. It's a temple. It's not the person.
Yes.
However, the Catholic Church says, paragraph 364 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, the human body, I think, the human body shares in the dignity of the image of God, which means that while the human body is not the person, it is a part of the person. I saw something in the Faith Explained that made it very clear to me. It used an analogy of zinc and copper. It says, you see zinc, you have copper. If you just twist them together mechanically, you still have zinc and copper. But if you melt them and meld, them together, you get a new substance called brass. So that's the same way the human being is. We are not soul and body separate things. We are the soul and body together. That's what makes you the human being. If you were just the body, you'd really just be an animal. And if you're just the soul, maybe you should be an angel. But when you put the soul and the body together, that's what makes the human being. So ultimately, the soul is the more important aspect of human nature. But the human body is just as important, it's just as much of a gift. So it shares in the dignity of the image of God. Therefore, while when you look at a human person, you look at the body, you're only seeing a part. And if you focus on only that part, then you are really not seeing the person as he or she is. Okay. My mom used to say something to me when I was still dating. She noticed the people I dated tended to be, well, I call it good looking by conventional standards. And she teased me once. She said, Dimma, you like fine boy? Fine boy no kill you. She said, look, better look for character. I said, because fine boy go do you something. This is, of course, we speak pidgin. He said, fine boy go do you something and you will look at him one day and he'll be ugly in your eyes. And I experienced it once with someone I was dating. He was really good looking, but he was so not nice. And one day I was looking at him because what was going through my mind was, this guy is actually handsome. But that was now my rational mind talking like, yeah, I can see you're fine, but you're not fine. And that speaks to the quality of your soul. So therefore, you might be looking at somebody who is conventionally unattractive, but the person has a truly beautiful soul. You're doing that person a huge disservice by calling the person ugly because the person is not fine by conventional standards.
So is there a way for people to look? Is there a way for people to look that makes society begin to shame people?
Is there
a way for
that
people
one
to
should look?
We know there are societal standards, but what are these standards per se? Like, people should look like this, people should like what are these standards? Exactly?
Well, I mean, we don't need anyone to tell us much now. Everybody knows that for the guys, they should be tall, dark, and handsome. For the ladies, we should have hourglass figure 8. Yes, that's it. Whether you're short or tall, figure 8, but the fairer, the better, the longer and straighter the hair. We know that those are the standards that society says now. But you see, it also tells you a lot about the fickleness of human beings, because there was a time when these were not the standards. If you go back to medieval times, the European standards for beauty were much different then. I think they needed their women to have a slightly protruding tummy, like to look curvy, to have something to grab, so to speak. And then the Africans, they claim, because to be very honest, we probably don't even know how much of our history they've really told us, but they claim that for Africans, we liked our women to be really fat. I'm not sure that that's very true, though, because our culture would not have allowed us to be fat back then with all the trekking to the farms. But yes, there have been different standards. By the 80s, that was when the ultra skinny standard, became the norm. by the 2000s, the early part of this 21st century, we started hearing thick. Thick is in, things like that. So they keep changing, which means that there really is no one way to look. It just tells you that what becomes the standard is a function of who's in power, really. Who controls the media, who controls the narrative.
Thank you.
There
Thank
isn't
you so much.
any one way.
Thank you. We'll be right back to talk more on body shaming after this short break.
Catholic Faith Forum on TV.
My name is Yuriolua, and what I think about teasing someone is, I think it's the way the person you are actually teasing receives it. Because I've been teased many times, and it's not actually, I don't take it, I just take it as, okay, it's a normal thing, we're all students and we should play. But some people just take it and they take it personal, and before you know it, fight starts from there and all of that. So I just think it depends on the way the person you're teasing receives it. It's not a big deal to me.
Sometimes I really think it's based on people. It depends on their behavior, it depends on their mood, and the way they see it. Some of them will take it as an insult. Sometimes they'll be happy and stuff like that.
The kind of people I keep around me anyways, it's a normal thing. We tease ourselves about how we look and then we just end it there. It's just all for fun. Nobody takes it personal or anything.
Okay, so you've been teased a million times before then?
Yes, I have.
And you took it in good faith?
I took it in good faith. So everybody around me just takes it in good faith that if you get teased, take it like that.
Okay. Do you at some point think you could work on some of the things they've talked about?
Sometimes, yeah. If more than one or two people tease me about it, then yeah, I think maybe it's something they've noticed that I'm doing, and maybe I can just work on it secretly.
Catholic Faith Forum on TV.
Welcome back. And we watched the video of people's reactions on body shaming. And some people talked about teasing some other people and why they should do it. Some said if he has to.
If he has to.
Imagine. So, Ma, what can you say about teasing people? Do you think people should really be teased about how they look?
Well, I mean, a key component of being a human being is a sense of humor. I mean, if you've had any relationship with God, excuse me, or you've looked through scripture, you will find that God does have a sense of humor. So, I mean, it's good to have a sense of humor, and it's okay, it's good to be able to take a little teasing, a little ribbing. I mean, it keeps us humble, so to speak. And I'm not really interested in putting people down to keep them humble. That's not what I'm saying, but it's just, we don't need to look perfect. It's okay not to look perfect. I mean, besides, what is perfect? Who defines what is perfect anyway? So we should all be able to tease, each other depending on the relationship. But like I said, relationship, it only happens in a context, within a certain context. The very word teasing implies play. You don't play with a stranger. You don't play with a stranger. So it's within the context of your relationship. And if the other components of the relationship are present, love, respect, then even the teasing will be playful and respectful, not malicious or hurtful. But that said, we also need to be kind. We need to be sensitive to other people, because among other things, it's we owe each other a debt of love, a debt of charity. And if something hurts someone, you shouldn't go out of your way to make them too conscious of it. Besides, we also know that there are traits that society mocks more, for example. So if you know that already exists, and you do not have any reason to believe that the person has come to a place of acceptance, then I don't think it's okay to tease. It's not okay to tease if it hurts.
Were you ever teased?
Naturally. About everything, from character to looks. On the looks angle, I think from childhood it was first. For the first few years of my life, I think I wasn't particularly teased. Although, I mean, if I remember something my mom used to say, they teased me when I was a baby because my hair didn't quite grow evenly. But I was too young to remember any of that. But from the earliest time of consciousness, I didn't get teased until maybe I was about 8 or so when I started wearing glasses.
Oh,
And it wasn't
okay.
for my features, it was because of the glasses. Then when I was teased for other qualities like ole, excuse me, ole, because I was very bookish and quiet. I didn't play much and all whatnot. But I didn't start getting teased for physical attributes until I was a teenager.
Okay.
Because I started growing really tall for my age, so I became longy, pole, all sorts. And then, of course, by the time I started developing, it was now for body proportions, big-chested, flat butt, things like that.
Really?
And but by that time, the teasing didn't have the effect it should have had because I was dealing with more internal battles. I was getting to know myself, becoming more aware of my character, among other things. I had a bad temper, I was intolerant, so all of that contributed to giving me a very negative self-image.
Okay.
Now, from childhood, my parents had drummed it into me that good looks are nice, but they're not everything. Character is very important. And I had been criticized heavily for my character flaws. So I had come to see myself as an ugly person. It took me a while to realize that looking at myself in the mirror and seeing myself as ugly came more from my internal
Inside.
perception.
Okay.
But you see what I was saying about the psychiatric disorder, for example. I mean, mine was obviously not on that scale, but it gives you an idea what it would look like on an even greater scale. Because I would look in the mirror and start looking for flaws. My mom then used to say, what is it? You say you don't like your nose, you don't like your eyes, you are looking for flaws. They don't exist. So that's the effect that teasing and criticism can have, whether it's of the body or of anything. So I didn't even have good reason per se to have bad body image, but there I was. So imagine what it's like for someone who looks in the mirror and sees features that are not conventionally attractive, and then people are constantly laughing at the person. You're fat, you're short, it's going to have an effect.
So how did you overcome this teasing? How did you overcome this, and how did you get better?
First things first, I learned to first identify what the real problem was. It took me a while, but my mom also contributed. When I was 17, she made me go audition for a modeling show, Runway. At the time, she didn't even explain her reasons. She just said, you're tall, go. They were advertising it on TV, so I went. And I got picked, and I had to start walking in heels everywhere. Now, note, I was already self-conscious about my height.
Yeah.
And as part of my training, I was going to wear heels everywhere. Like I was getting on buses with heels. I had to get really comfortable. I got to the point where I could run in heels.
Wow.
And the first thing that did for me was tell me being tall is not a crime.
Yeah.
But I was still self-conscious about my height for a long, long time. Ultimately, I would say I was fortunate still, because despite all that insecurity, at my very base, I had maybe an unshakable core of confidence. I think that's very likely because no matter what has happened, no matter how I felt, I've never really been afraid to address people, to air my views, even if they were unpopular. And most of my views were unpopular. But I've always been able to deal with that. And then if there was pain, I'd deal with the pain. So I don't know if I'm even a good example to use, but that's where I started from. So when the insecurity really came, I had to learn with my mother's help that it wasn't from a real place. First and foremost, it was because I felt ugly on the inside. And if I was ugly on the inside, well, it could be fixed. If it was a character issue, it could be fixed with God's help, of course, because I made a lot of mistakes along the way. But ultimately it was learning to know and accept myself and recognize that God did not make a mistake. Not with making my personality and not with making my body. So I had to learn to work it. So yeah, the fashion show thing pretty much just got me to accept my height, and it was in a very natural way because, like I said, she didn't call me and say, oh, go to this show so that you will learn to be confident. It was just a natural side effect, you know, byproduct. I became more comfortable with my height. I used to try to slouch, you know, a bit, and my mom would slap my back up like, walk tall, you have nothing to be ashamed of, you know. And so that helped with the height thing. With the butt thing, well, that's what I was given. So there was really nothing I could do about it, and it was a case of, it's really not important. It's ultimately not important. Who I am as a person is more important. And then, of course, I also made friends. I had really good friends who did not...
reassured you.
That's the funny thing. They didn't even go out of their way to reassure me, per se. It was too natural. There was a naturalness with which they accepted
you.
all that I am. And they're still my best friends today.
Yeah.
They're really, really beautiful human beings. And I remember I said to not one guy, at least 2 or 3 guys, you know, how my best friends were so beautiful, beautiful girls. And they're like, nah, you don't have a good eye for women's beauty. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Serious?
And they're like, yes, you said one friend of yours is very beautiful, and when we see her, she's just there. So it showed me that I had also learned to look at human beings differently, because they are not beautiful in their eyes, but they are really, really beautiful in my eyes because they are amazing human beings.
Wow.
You know, so it also taught me that if I can see beyond other people's looks, then I can become a better person regardless of how I look. Yeah, I'm a little vain. I like to look good, but ultimately it doesn't define me. I can still go out without makeup. I can still go out not being very well dressed, and as long as I'm sure of my content, that's all that really matters.
Thank you, Mrs. Ophili Egungo, for being here with us today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you learned a lot on body shaming. Do not tease people if you're not a friend. Don't tease them. And Chima, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you so much for having me. On my show.
I don't know what's wrong with me. I just enjoyed this episode so much.
Yes, we all did. We really enjoyed the show. And first things first, always have love in your heart before you decide to even say stuff to people, because you don't know what can hurt them.
Yes, thank you. Always join us. And if you have more questions, you can ask us on our social media platforms at CFF on TV, on Twitter and Facebook, and also Instagram.